The episode you're about to watch or listen to is one of mature content. Please use your discretion. Hey, thanks again for joining us for another episode of Triple Play. Don't forget to
like and subscribe, or you can visit Resource One, Andy McCollum, 636-458-1798, or Chris at CS Design, 573-436-3717. Those are our guys. We trust them. Use them if you need them.
Absolutely.
We're back with Don.
We're back with Don. We have Don here, yeah. And so this is going to be fun. Don, we kind of did your last episode, and we got to talking a little bit about this addiction, but this addiction was pretty serious at the time. And so before we kind of get in there, I just want to give our listeners some background, because I think there's some pretty big stats here that we need to talk about. So for those who don't know, this episode we're going to be dealing with a pretty heavy topic, and one that's, I think, timely, pornography. So, and I want to give a few stats here. So the adult industry makes some more than 6,000 movies, not clips. These are full-on movies a year, and they gross more than $12 billion, which is right on pace with the NFL. So, in revenue. So, and that's just in the U.S. alone. So, the average age for the first contact with pornography now is the average. Okay, it doesn't mean they aren't younger, but the average age of the first contact is 9. Okay, the average age of those seeking is 30 to 35. Okay, there are more than 68 million porn search engine requests daily, and growing daily. 67% of all men use at least once a month. 50% of pastors online visit at least once a week. So, and for those who don't know, this is also something that's affecting females. Okay, of a study found 76% of females between the ages of 18 and 30 had watched pornographic material. They did find that the number of women who watch it regularly decreases down to 16% as they get older. So what they have found is, when it comes to pornography, is that it's something that's much more engaging in the younger part of their thing, and they think it's because of their testosterone levels and sexual curiosity younger. So that's...
Well, it's got to be it. Hormones, right?
Well, but this, it seems like once about 25 to 30 that women, it really decreases. So they're right on pace with boys for the most part. It seems like in your younger years, where an average man continues to increase into his 30s and 35s, where women seem to peak around 20, 25, and then they go down, like 50%. Wow. So yeah. So it's like just there in that time. That's why they say they're in that. But they also say that over 30% of women watch at least once a week. 30% say that they follow it a few times a month. 17% of the women say they struggle with an addiction to it, and so it's
prevalent.
Yeah,
to say the least.
Oh, and 4 adult websites rank in the top 25 internet sites in the country. So we're to say that this is not an issue would be crazy. So, and most recently, I was watching Joe Rogan just in the past week, and he had an episode where they were talking about it. So, I mean, it's something that the culture is starting to take, I think, a little bit of notice on. I would also say one of the things that I've always said, if you want to know what kind of sexual perversions are going to be in society, look at what's prevalent in the porn industry and in 5 to 10 years, because they average age is between 25 and 30. You hit these young people in college or coming out of college, and with the pornography, make it seem like it's normal. Within 10 years, it becomes 5-10 years, it becomes very, very normal. Right now, what's number one topic on porn sites? And if you were to do a search and look for the number one topic is usually some kind of incestual of sexual encounter. Stepson with stepmom, stepfather with stepdaughter, stepson with stepsister, brother and sister. So a lot starting to introduce this topic of interfamily sexual relationships. So don't be surprised. That's actually been the number one topic for about the past 5 years in the industry. So don't be shocked in the next 5 years if we start to see that becoming more of an accepted norm in society, because if they're watching it regularly and it becomes a norm, then once it's introduced as a norm in society, it's easy to accept, right? So,
Well, yeah. I mean, I think the thing, I think what you're seeing in society now is the verse about how people of the world, they say, let's break their bonds. Let's break the bonds of Christians, basically. And so what they're doing now is they're trying to detach any bad feeling associated with what they're doing in society. And you're seeing that all sectors of life. They're trying to say, like, we're actually trying to get rid of the feeling of feeling bad. So that's what you're seeing now. So that's why it's like overhauling. They're trying to normalize literally everything. They're trying to break the bonds of feeling guilty for their sin. But, right?
yeah.
Hearing all that, Don,
Look, yeah.
what do you think? How quickly did this become normalized in your young life?
Yeah, you said you were introduced to it at a young age, right?
Yeah. And then on the tail end of that, how, as quickly as that grabbed a hold of your life, did it just quickly dissolve after you after you were released from that? Is like as quickly as you were in, or as quickly as, obviously there's some time in between of things that are happening, but
yeah, kind of walk us through that. So,
Yeah, so I was introduced to porn like I said earlier, probably 5, 6
wow.
years old, and I had access to it. So once I found it,
So was it magazines in your house, videos? What was
it was
the
magazines.
okay? Yeah, Ted Bundy said that's how he started his stuff. Is that when he was 9 years old, he found, I think it was 9, 10, 11, he found one in a dumpster in a back alley, and it started his movement towards wanting more, wanting more, wanting more, to which eventually made him one of the largest mass murderers in the country.
Right.
So
Yeah, so at that age, I don't even know what I'm really looking at,
right.
but it's enough to spark something in you to say, to draw you back, So I mean that just started a pattern too of lying and sneaking around and going through my parents' things and that kind of stuff, right? So knowing it was wrong, right? Even as a young kid like that, I think I remember one time where it was maybe out in the open, really young, like maybe on a nightstand or something, and I remember like being on a chair or something and looking at it on top of the nightstand, and then my mom coming in and like, oh, don't look at it, move me from it. And both my parents have passed. I generally don't like to talk and give details like where it came from, but it's pretty obvious when I talk about it, that it was around the house.
yeah.
And so, I knew where the stashes were. I knew where to find them when they'd go out in the garden and do something in the garden, work the garden, or be out of, when I was older and they'd leave me at the house. That's the first place I'd go. I mean, I really became attached to it. There was things from Playboy to Hustler to some more hardcore stuff in there, and
So did it move to videos?
it eventually did when I got older, and the invention of the videotape and the VCR, and had a friend that worked at a video store, and they had a porn section, and he'd let me borrow the trailer tapes. But yeah, it moved into that. And then again, this is another. You can't talk about porn and lust and sexuality and all these things, and not bring in masturbation, because that becomes a huge part too.
Right. That's the release of it, right? I mean, that's
Right.
You got to have. You got to have. It's kind of like you don't take a drug without a high.
Right.
So you don't watch porn without
Right.
wanting to get a feel out of it, right? And
Right.
so you either either emulate it one way or another, right?
Right.
So absolutely.
So yeah, that it really it had a grip on my life for, boy, I don't know. I was early 40s when I God freed me from it. So from maybe 5, 6, 7, somewhere in there that was that many years of consuming porn from that young impressionable age, even where I didn't know what I was looking at. That formed a lot of my opinions in the world. Right? I could go to church, but what am I feeding myself, right, on a daily basis?
Right.
And then what I would have always said I wasn't addicted to it. I just enjoyed it, and it kind of changed how I viewed sexuality. And growing up, there were TV shows that were in the 70s that were, getting more and more sexual in content. Remember Three's Company?
Oh yeah. I mean, they kept going, and through the '80s, and I mean, if you look back, you can see the continued push by Hollywood, and introducing the model, and they get less and less clothed, more and more scandalous, more and more, and then we got enough of that, and then we had to go to reality TV, right? And then we took reality TV and said, like, let's just make it about that. We'll call it a Love Island, and a bunch of hot, horny teenagers or young people together, and see what happens, right? Or we'll put them on a boat. So,
Right.
absolutely.
But yeah, that, and then growing up in a religious home with, that content also in the home, right? That's against each other, right? So what are we saying there? You know what I'm saying? So the worldview there was off cue, to say the least, or skewed. I remember my general feelings on it were, well, this is okay. It's just meant for older people, kind of like liquor. I can drink a beer when I'm 21, but I shouldn't have it now. My parents can have porn, but it's just because it's for them as they're older. It's not for someone when they're younger. So it really skewed on what I thought was acceptable and unacceptable. And then you mix in, the media that's around the house too. And, my mom didn't like Three's Company or whatever, but my dad watched it. And there's other shows like MASH that were hugely popular. Then, the doctors are having affairs on their wives and drinking it up. And I mean, that kind of influence really has an effect on how you view the world, unless you're brought up again saying that in a biblical worldview that these things aren't appropriate. Then that's why we don't consume them, and then why we don't consume them is because God has His law to us. He's got His word to us, and this is how we honor God. This is how we dishonor God. We're going to live for God in our family, or So, like I said, with the Catholic upbringing, it's different. It's looking back on it now. I think it's way it's a works based kind of thing, and then I think a lot of Catholics kind of still think they're good people. That they're not.
I would even say in the church. I mean, I think regardless of the church, you find people who go just and think that they're good people because they show up on the Sunday.
Right.
But
that's not exclusive to kids.
And what they put in their lives from Monday to Friday is completely contradictory to that Sunday morning.
Well,
And by the world standards, outside of this porn in my home, my parents were loving people. They were great parents. They were kind to other people. They gave. You would, this is either a huge blind spot, for them. But outwardly, they're a normal family.
Yeah.
People would never think, oh my gosh, your parents had porn in the home. You wouldn't even think that. I mean, they would have guessed it.
So then you get married, and you mentioned in your last time together that there was conflict with you and Carrie. So how did that kind of start to come about? So with you and your bride.
Well, when we started dating, I think I mentioned it to her at one point, and she was really upset. But then I told her, I was okay, if it's that big a deal to you, I'll stop. Which I couldn't do, but I thought I would do. I mean, and then pretty much I just hit it. And I think, if I'm remembering correctly, I think we got married thinking, and she wasn't thinking that I was still doing that. And it really never stopped. Maybe a short period of time where I tried, but I was really unable to control myself there. So yeah, we got married, and then I don't know if I brought it to her or if she found something on an internet browser or something. And I know at one time she definitely did find something in the history. And I said, oh, I must have just clicked. It must have been a pop-up, or I clicked on that by mistake and lied about it. But I said earlier, there was other times that I did go to her and say, I am looking at porn. I do this. I don't see it as a big deal. I even tried to bring her into it,
almost probably like a
to my
call for help.
to
like,
my
hey,
shame, But I mean, that literally that crushed her, and I understand why it would. Here she is, married to me. We're one flesh, and I'm giving myself out to other
flesh.
flesh.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm entertaining, and that she's not enough for me, right? I've got to see this. I've got to do this, and no woman can live up to that. That image, the imagery of pornography, which isn't real. But yeah, eventually I got to the point where, I hardened myself to her and to the issue and said, I'm not going to talk with you about it anymore. If you're not going to get on board, and if you're not going to co-sign, I'm trying to be this great guy and be honest with you, then I'm just not going to talk with you about it. And we went for years that way. And early on, I went to church with her some. but eventually I broke off from church. I didn't really want to. I didn't want to go. I'd rather be at home watching football and just, I'd heard it all before. I'd seen it all before. It didn't do anything for me, and that really hurt her. That her partner in life is separated from her in the most important area of her life, which is her Christianity, her spirituality, her relationship with God. But eventually we had kids, and once we had kids, I conceded, okay, I realize if we raise the kids, Daddy believes one thing, Mommy believes another, it's going to be a mess.
Right.
So I said, I'll go to church once we have kids. So we ended up moving to Pacific. We built a house. We started looking for a church, found West County Community. We tried a few different ones. But we ended up finding a home there. And, Pastor Phil was a great evangelist, right?
Yeah.
He brought the word. And I needed to hear that. And he was probably what's the term? I mean, he was a great evangelist,
Yeah, he was a great he was a good pastor. Every pastor has flaws, I think. But that being said, he there were some great things, and he was an evangelist at heart. His sharing the gospel was very, very important to him.
Mm-hmm.
He'd been the Missouri Baptist Association's evangelist for years. Before he was even a pastor. So that was, ingrained in him, and he certainly made sure that you heard the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, and the seeds were definitely planted there, and whether I rejected some of God's word or not at that point, I was hearing it.
yeah,
I was there, and early on there, like you said, when I got sick, I hear about people praying for me and stuff like that, which always amazes me because at that point I'm an unbeliever and she's a believer, so we weren't really trying to mesh in too well. We'd show up, we didn't really stay out around for fellowship a whole lot. We'd come and we'd go.
yeah, I'd have to catch you every now and then. And me and you would, yeah, you go ahead. You need something to drink?
No, I got it. I just had
Okay.
another,
Yeah, I was gonna say. I remember you would kind of go, and I'd tell Amy, "Hey, hold on, I gotta catch you down before he leaves," and I would try to strike up a conversation with you because we always enjoyed talking, especially like '80s, '90s music. Mm-hmm. You and I would dig on reminiscing back in some of the old school stuff that we both enjoyed.
Right.
So
where are we at?
Well, kids, you got your kids. You're coming to church now.
And another big thing was, I saw enough in the pattern of my life and what my dad introduced to me that I didn't want to do the same thing to my kids. Whether I believed the gospel or not, I knew the damage it was doing to me, even though I really kind of wouldn't admit that. But I don't want my kids watching porn, obviously. I mean, that would be like a no-brainer, right? So that started a thing too, a spark, I would say, in me that, man, I don't want to gift this to my kids. I don't want them following in my footsteps here. So that's another part of the path.
How's that affected? Just knowing how young you started, I would imagine it's on your mind how kids do see it. Preventative measures. Do you have any tips on how to watch for that stuff? Or
after I got saved and got freed from it, I did constantly look for ways to protect the kids and devices. And, our kids haven't had cell phones until they're 16, but they've had access to iPads, which don't have cell service, but, they pull the Wi-Fi from the house. But, I put a whole house blocker through the Wi-Fi.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we do the same thing with my kids. We
You can use Open DNS or Family DNS. There's a few ones you can use, but you basically put it into your router, and all your traffic goes through this service, which filters out porn and some bad sites before it comes back down to, it'll block.
and you can block keywords and
that's cool.
yeah, and then you can and we do the same thing. None of our kids actually even at 16, we don't give them a phone. We have shared phones, so they can, if they have an activity, they can take one of the shared phones with them.
Well, I mean, it's just what a scary world it is, right? I mean, all this technology and stuff is great on one hand, but there's just so many evils intertwined with it. Like, you can literally access anything from the phone right here,
Yeah. Well, and people can access you. I mean, that's what I tell them. I mean, you may think you're talking to somebody your own age through a gaming, site or whatever you're doing, but the truth is that's just what that person makes you think they are. I said, you could think it's somebody your age, and it could be a 50-year-old man.
Yeah,
I said, and police do it too. Police try to, because they're trying to catch those people. They're on there, so.
Well, the devil's made it so easy for us to get it and to be, undetected in doing it. back in the days, I had to sneak around my house to find it and to consume it without getting caught. I remember the first time I walked into a porn store, the feeling that felt like, the nerve that I had to get up to be like, I'm one of these guys walking in this porn shop to rent tapes or something. But that was a barrier. I had to harden myself to do that. I knew I had to go against my conscience to do that. Now, all those conscious, you still have a conscience because you're looking at your phone and you know what you're looking at. But just that other feel, that social feeling of being found out, or you can hide so well with a phone or with an internet, a computer in your house.
Yeah.
It's so much easier to sneak around and so much more accessible than we ever had it. I had to pay for it. I had to find money to rent it. Everything now is free.
Yeah.
They want you to just click on the site and they'll draw you into all kinds of other stuff. But
Well, I want to take, because his question was kind of towards so you get to where you're saved. How did you have to battle this? I mean, obviously you talked about how you overcame the addiction after a few weeks, but how did that all kind of come about? So you have this. You obviously have this during. You got kids. You're noticing all this. Your wife obviously doesn't like it. Now you're in a hospital too, and you're noticing all the filth. I mean, you kind of mentioned on that last episode. So, where does this? How does this now make you come to this decision of pushing this away and overcoming it, plus giving your heart to Christ? So
recapping a little bit from the last episode in case people don't watch both. In 2000. Was it 9? 2009, I almost died. Got a staph infection. Didn't know what the doctors didn't know what it was. Got really sick on my deathbed, basically. We're at West County then, community church, and God saved me from that staph infection. They did exploratory surgery. They got it all removed. A couple weeks in a hospital. High dose antibiotics. I get healed. I start my prayer life then, seeking God to reveal Himself to me that I would want to believe, but kind of show me the proof, show me the evidence, right? And it's all obviously it's all around us, but then falling right back in to porn when I'm able, and this is really a really low point in my testimony is that I was so hurt from this surgery. They cut me in both sides and. Just really difficult walking. Had a walker for a while to kind of get around, but I was so enslaved to pornography. I mean, I'm just laying in my bed, hardly able to move, and I'm wanting so badly to go to my basement where I had my computer to get down there to look at porn. And I was forced off it for probably a month from being sick and then being in the hospital a couple weeks to then recovering several weeks, months. But I remember at one point, I guess Carrie went to work, or the kids must have been at school or preschool or whatever it was. And I just literally remember almost crawling on my hands and knees to the basement to get to that computer to get to porn. And it was just like the lowness that felt, and how gross it felt to be like that enslaved to something, that I felt like I had to have this. I wasn't even well enough to sit up, basically, or walk around. And there I was crawling to it, and I never forget that feeling. And then like you said earlier, the kind of the things I was viewing in the hospital was opening my eyes. God was opening my eyes in the hospital because I was so depressed and laying there and looking at the TV all day for 2 weeks, and it was everything was sexual. All the jokes were sexual, and I was like, this is just gross. This is normal TV for people. Well, on this side, I'm watching porn almost every day, So what does that say about me? And then why is this grossing me out all of a sudden? It's just the sexual innuendo or the joke or the, why is it funny? Why is this not funny to me right now?
I would imagine you probably saw the scheme that the devil is putting on the world in some sense.
Exactly, and to this day, God uses those low points in our lives who bring us to low points to wake us up and to open our eyes and to draw us to Him. But I mean, I wouldn't trade that injury, that sickness, that staph infection for anything in the world, because I needed that kind of a wake-up call. I was so dead to sin. I was so hard in my heart, so selfish. So, I was an idolater. I was a thief. I stole stuff. I blasphemed. I cursed. I mean, I'm a completely different person now. I mean, and back then I would have thought I was a great guy. I had friends that encouraged me, and I was the jackass guy before jackass. Anything to get a laugh. Nothing was out of bounds at work. And in fact, I would use porn at work. I had access to a training room and a key, and I'd go in there and I'd bring porn tapes to work, and I'd watch porn in the training room at work. That was my life, man.
Yeah.
It was
You were into it.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
And so how do you get free of
And
this?
then I got freed. So again, I walked. I'm hearing God's word. I got kids now. I see the battle there of, am I going to train them in the way I might be living, or am I going to change myself? And then finding that Matthew 5 Bible verse in the office that day, just the Bible's sitting there. I open it up and I read, "You have heard it is not to not commit adultery, but I tell you, whoever looks at a woman with lust commits adultery in his heart. It's better for you to cut out an eye or cut off a hand than to be thrown into hell." I mean, and that struck me to the heart right there. I mean, it really did. It was like, Carrie had been telling me for years that it was a sin and it was cheating on her, and I was like, no, no, no. So I'd heard it before, but God brought me to that verse at that time, at that moment.
So that you could agree with him.
And so he could reveal it to me, and I said, "Yep, this is right. I've got no excuse. This is right." And so and then I start repenting, praying, crying out to God.
Right there at that time? With that verse, or was it shortly after that?
Well, that started it. I don't know if at that moment I did,
Right.
But I started getting on my knees, literally, and praying. And I would pray to God to take this from me. I didn't want to look at this anymore. I didn't want to do this anymore. That I was trusting in Him and believing that He could heal me, and really just in humility, because I'd been broken, to seek God and to cry out to Him and to resist it. Now, I have to say that was a battle, and again that went on for months. I think I had stopped looking at porn maybe March, April of 2011, and I was saved in June. So, I mean, it was literally a battle. I equate it to someone that's on drugs and going through withdrawal. Mm-hmm. That pull, that need to have that thing, to digest it, and to whether it's like a chemical or something I'm looking at. But yeah, that was tough. And then we also get into the conversation about masturbation. I mean, no pun intended, but that masturbation and porn goes hand in hand. And I was addicted to masturbating and pleasing myself just as much as I was to looking at porn. Now I didn't see that piece of it. Okay, so part of my getting out of porn was, a lot of it was me thinking about my wife and pleasing myself. I'm not going to look at that anymore. I'm not going to look at that. I'm not going to entertain those thoughts. That's not my wife. I shouldn't be looking at that. But it would be okay to look. It'd be okay to think about my wife and do that. Well, that's also not God's design, right? I should be with her if I want to be with her, not with myself, right? I mean, that's just not how it's supposed to work.
Well, He calls us to go and pray, and when you're done praying, come back and you can be with your wife. I mean, there's this healthy separation, but then you draw back.
So yeah, so I was kind of weaning myself off of it, Really, it was just all God and praying to Him and things like that. But again, that one day I got up off my knees and I felt it was gone, and the progress I'd made. I'd gone 2, 3, 4 weeks without looking at it, and I thought, man, this is amazing. How is this happening? I've never gone more than a week. Maybe I've been on a vacation or something with the family and have access to it or something. But just getting off my knees and feeling just a sense of relief, and I think I even said audibly to myself, I'm never looking at that again. And I haven't. Now, there was one other time, like during that, I looked at a Victoria's Secret magazine, because it was laying around. And I was again feeling kind of a fix. I needed a fix, and I looked at that and I was like, that was the same thing. I said to myself, that's the same thing as porn.
Yeah, I think there's always a proclivity to it, right? I mean, just like any drug addict, there's always a proclivity to it. You're never, you may be freed of the momentary addiction, but it doesn't mean that there's not a pull towards it.
Right. So that did take some time, but with every victory, it got easier. With every victory, it gets easier, and it gets less of a hold on me. And I really feel like I was free at the moment I got up off my knees that day. But I would say that the battle still raged for disciplining myself. I don't think God often totally frees us for something without building a system of discipline around in our lives. and it took me a couple years after I was even saved to be in my Bible every day. You know, just that kind of discipline to sit down and do it, but again, staying in prayer, staying in the Word, those are huge keys.
Yeah, I mean,
Overcoming
and then
staying on the right path. I mean, now I'm to the point where I'm really not tempted by porn. I have no desire to look at it, none. And you know, you may see an attractive woman or something out, and you notice she's attractive, but you know, you're like, okay, I saw her. That's it.
Yeah, you can't ignore beauty.
I'm not gonna look at her. I'm not gonna stare at her. I'm not gonna lust for her.
right.
You know, and if you're at the gym or something, you know, you kind of do your head turn thing, or you close your eyes while you're doing a rep or something. But you do what you need to do to keep yourself from falling back into temptation. You know, but again, it's not some kind of pull that I deal with every day. I don't hardly deal with it at all. Just the occasional, you know, something on the side of your screen that's suggestive on Facebook or YouTube or something, and you're like, okay, I know what that is. I'm not going to look at that, you know.
And also, when a couple of schmucks come ask you to bring it up again.
And I don't mind talking about that. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't bring back any kind of desire to, because I really feel like I've been set free from that sin. I'm no longer a slave to it.
That's awesome.
And
So how's that changed your marriage? Because obviously not only saved, but then this addiction's gone. I'm sure you probably have a closeness and an intimacy with your wife that you didn't experience for the first, you know.
oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, the intimacy in our relationship wasn't there. I mean, and I get it. She's probably guarding herself, protecting herself from, you know, the hurt that I would be bringing her. There was that closeness that wasn't there. But it was I would say Carrie was amazing when I did confess to her, because I was saved driving home from work, and I was listening to a lot of Christian radio, then Bot Radio I believe was on, and just listening to sermons a lot, and I just broke down crying on my way home from work one night in June of 2011, and I just started crying. I was just like, I believe in you. You're who you say you are. You know, I will follow you wherever you send me. And I believe that, all that kind of stuff. And that was it. That was the moment of conversion. And then, again, I waited a week or two to tell Carrie, because I was afraid to bring up the porn subject, because I needed to come clean to her. I needed to be honest. I needed to confess my sins to her. And I knew that was going to break her heart again. But, you know, I remember we just laid in bed and I started talking to her about it. And we both cried. She was happy that, you know, I was saved, obviously. But she never brings it up. She doesn't hold it against me. She never goes back to the well and says, I remember when you did this, you were like this to me. Never.
That's awesome.
I mean, what a godly example of a wife in forgiveness, because if the tables were turned, I'm not sure I could be so gracious. I mean, the way I treated her and the way I, you know, discarded her feelings and held this stupid stuff up above my relationship with her was just insane. But again, God makes all things new, and yeah, our relationship's fantastic now, and intimacy and closeness like we never had, you know.
Yeah, that's what I always think of, you know, like when you're giving away something over here, you're not able to give it here, so you're only experiencing a little bit of the joy that God really has intended for you in your marriage. So now I know that also has led to a passion in your life at your church, that you've been doing Bible studies and mentoring and helping other men, because this is a growing. I mean, it's been around forever, but it's become more and more of a known addiction, I would say. And you know, when you talked about masturbating, the research shows that the same high you get is very similar to a drug. Your dopamines and all that stuff releasing. That porn and through masturbation gives you really a very similar high, if not almost exactly the same high, depending on what study you read, as to somebody who's doing some kind of a drug, and the same kind of release and feelings from that. So growing. As I said before at the beginning of the episode, I mean, it's the number one podcaster in the world was talking about the subject a little bit on one of his podcasts. So what have you seen in these men as you talk to them? Is there some certain themes, certain things that we should keep an eye out for as men? Is there you know, give it tell me kind of what you've been seeing and what has helped the men and that you've been able to help mentor. So
Yeah, so we've done quite a few classes. And what we've gone through a couple different studies. One was called from Joe Dallas. He's a reformed homosexual. So his study was good. Now the issue with his study was he had the masturbation subject as kind of the Bible's not real specific on it. It doesn't mention it. So whatever's okay in your conscience with it. Again, he's not talking about it's okay to lust after other women and things like that, but maybe almost as a
Yeah, it gives the toehold there.
yeah,
So,
right. So we didn't necessarily agree with that. Although at the time once I was going to start these classes, I was still masturbating some, and I thought to myself, am I really going to lead a group of men against sexual sin when I masturbate from time to time? It just didn't sit right with me, and I was like, well, so I had to confront that issue. Like, why am I doing this? Why can't I wait for my wife? And even though I'm not thinking of any other women when I do it, it just is this right or wrong? So that
Yeah.
I've kind of gone back and forth on that a little bit, and that's part of it was the Joe Dallas study was he was saying the one thing, and eventually we got to the point, and I got into Pure Life Ministries.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about Pure Life Ministries. A lot of my friends really, really highly recommend them.
His course is called At the Altar of Sexual Idolatry, and he talks about basically saying masturbation is wrong. We shouldn't be doing it, and I kind of agreed with that. So that's where I am on that subject now. And again, it's something that once you set in your mind what's in your heart that okay, this is wrong, then God gives you the tools to
Overcome.
to overcome it and step away from that. So, but I think that as a big thing with guys, you just get so used to that habit, you know.
So do you find that as a common thing among men that you work with or have dealt with?
Well,
Yeah.
in the class, with you're dealing with a pornography issue. You're dealing with all kinds of lust, idolatry, masturbation. As far as dealing with the classes and what I've found, the most difficult challenge to me in a class in a setting like that is you have to really you have to get into a salvation issue with them because and I'm not saying that because you're doing porn you're not saved. However, if you are living contrary to God's word, it says if you love me you will keep my commandments. If you are enslaved to something and you're saying you can't stop, that's a sign that you're not saved, you're not regenerate. Now, can you fall back into it? David fell back into adultery. He fell into adultery, he sinned, right? And then he killed the woman's husband. So there was a time period there where he was not living, and we all don't live up to the standard, right? But most of the people you're dealing with in these classes are men with this issue have been doing it for years and years and years. And some would also say, I've been saved for years and years and years. Now, to me, those two don't go together. God, if you're saved and you have the Holy Spirit in you, God should be sanctifying you. You should not be enslaved to anything. Again, we'll still sin. We all fall short. But when we realize that sin, we repent from it. We humble ourselves before God and we move on from it. So that's the big issue. You don't want to bring in a bunch of guys and say, okay, well, you're not saved if you're in here. It's not like that. You got to have some grace, right? And you got to hear their story, where they've been and how long they've been in it. And then let Scripture reveal to them what Scripture says about it.
Right.
But a churched person is probably more difficult to deal with than a non-church person, in my opinion, because they've heard the Bible, they know the Bible, but whether the Bible has taken a place in their heart, whether they've been converted, that's not a work I can do anyway. But to get freed from that, they're going to have to get saved if they're not saved, right? And if they are saved, they're got to be like, okay, I'm at the end of myself here. I know what I'm doing is wrong. I've got to turn from this. This thing's gotten a hold of me. What can I do? What can I do? Well, then you've got accountability. You've got prayer partners. Hey, call me if you're struggling. Call me if you're struggling, and I'll talk you through it. Resist the devil and flee from him, and he'll flee from you. I mean, so.
And you can have accountability. I've done it with a couple guys where we did Covenant Eyes, where I could look at their browser, they could look at mine. So, and that way you have some accountability and what's going on the internet.
Right.
So
I just think that's the hardest thing. The hardest thing is someone that, in my opinion, I would say he's not saved, based on knowing them and their story and how long they've been doing it. And then every week they keep coming back. Well, yeah, I failed again. Yeah, I failed again. Yeah, I failed again. They've got no victory. They're enslaved. But getting them to realize that they're not enslaved, or that they're needing of the gospel again, and you keep presenting the gospel. That's hard. I mean, it really is, because it's a work of God, and I'm obviously not able to do it.
Right. We can only plant seeds. God has to water and grow them.
If my wife could have saved me, she would have.
Yeah.
Right? And she would have taken porn from me. If she could have, she would have. But
Well, I think she hated. I think there's verses.
definitely-
Yeah, there's verses
Right.
that your situation is mentioned, and
Right.
there is something that she does to bring you along.
right.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely a timely issue, because I think in the culture, we're coming to a boiling point. It seems like, in a lot of different ways, and I keep hearing a lot more and more men talking about it. I've had probably, I know at least 2 in the past few weeks, men that directly called me and talked to me about the draw of pornography and the lure of it, and their conscience is letting them know things aren't quite right, and so I just think that it's something that as a church we've kind of not really addressed it for a long time. We always just kind of say don't do it, but we've never really discussed it. We've never really, we talked about how you talked about how the church should get engaged in pro-lifeness, but they've never really engaged anything against pornography either. Very little. It's not something that the pastors are really talking from the pulpit. They'll say and I say that like indirectly. They'll say it indirectly, like, "Hey, we should, God has this plan," or whatever. But if you talk to a lot of pastors, they'll be like, "Well, yeah, I talk about it because I just say, marriage is between a man and a woman." But have you really preached about the dangers of pornography? Have you?
Why would they? Half of them are doing it.
Yeah, that was
According to the statistics, so half the churches are
that's
disqualified
mind-blowing.
anyways.
Isn't that mind-blowing? It's
mind-blowing.
50% of pastors.
So I don't know what it is today, but I can say in the early 2000s, there were 4 men's conferences that were Christian men's conferences that where pastors were at. And afterwards, one of the statistic groups out there got a hold of the hotel rooms to see how much of these pastors, that the people who were attending the convention, had watched pornography. And they actually had found that paid pornography had gone up more than ever before. It was like one of their highest peaks was when Christian men went in for these Christian conferences. They could engage in this sin, and it was supposed to be a man conference about marriage. It was I can't remember what the conference was, but they just found that it spiked, and the average, like through a popular weekend, it spiked like 60% higher than their average when Christian men conferences were going there of the paid porn through the hotel rooms. So it's certainly something that has been around for some time. I've seen different stats put out by a couple of different groups that do Christian stats out there and work with a lot of different companies. But I would just say that to think that it's not happening in the church, that's like acting like divorce doesn't happen to church. Like it's rampant these days, and I think as believers we've got to step up to the plate a little bit.
Well, if you go back to Matthew 5, that verse I talked about, the analogy Christ gives about cutting your eye out or cutting your hand off. That's how serious it is, right? And I just don't think you can kind of tell when a guy comes in and he's not super serious about it. Like he's there because he knows he needs to be, maybe, or
Or he got in trouble.
or maybe he has a worldly sorrow, right, instead of a godly sorrow. And that's a big one, I think, because you say to him, where are you looking at porn at? Well, on my PlayStation, maybe a YouTube. Yeah, get rid of it. And they look at you like, what? How can I get rid of my PlayStation? How can I get rid of my phone? Well, Christ is telling us to cut out our eyes and slice off our hands. That's causing us to sin, right? And I've had guys go through the study that never gave up their PlayStation, never gave up their phones.
I didn't even know you could get it through a PlayStation. That's interesting.
Well, because there's a browser on it. Now, you could also
Yeah, it makes sense. I just I never used a browser on ours. I have a Xbox, and I don't think I've used it but a few times.
They actually make blockers for them. So you can actually get something for your PlayStation to help you in that area. And at the end of the day, if you want to look at it, you'll get around to whatever you can to look at it.
Sure.
But the idea is, how serious is this to you? What are you prepared to give up to help yourself fight temptation when it comes?
Right.
Because it's a mind issue. Well, it could be a heart issue if you're not saved, but I mean, it starts in the mind, right? You see something, you think of something, and then you're presented with this thing, right? I either just thought about porn, I thought about an old scene I remember from the past, or I see an attractive woman or something at the gym, whatever it is, you're confronted with the issue. Now, what are you going to do with it? Now, in my early days of repenting from it, again, God put it on my heart, like, you've got to take captive this thought right now. Because if I didn't, I'd be at the computer. If I entertained it for 30 seconds or a minute, I'd be done, because I was weak, right? And I just gave into it. So if you attack it, when that first thought comes in your mind,
I like that. I like what you said. Take captive your thoughts.
right? And then also, like, it's good to have just a Bible verse.
I do that often. If I ever feel
resist the devil and he will flee from you. Seek God,
Yeah.
There's plenty of them. I mean, but
there's all sorts of that you
Right.
can. I have a whole slew when I start to get anxious that I
even
go
the Matthew
through.
5 one, I'll say that, like, you said you shouldn't commit adultery, but what I say to you is this. Okay, I know what that is, right? I know what God says about that, and I know what I'm presented with, and I'm not going down that road, So, yeah, but taking captive of that thought, and then putting in disciplines in your life, like if it's a blocker on your phone or accountability on your phone, those things can help. Again, those aren't the answer, because we're dealing with a heart issue here, Someone that's into porn is an idolater, at least for the time being. Now, they may, again, they could be saved and just have fallen into this or chosen to go down a road that's led them to something that they weren't planning on, and now they're stuck in it. They feel like they're stuck in it. But you've got to have disciplines in your life to be in the Word, to pray, to put up barriers, to confess to another brother, someone that you can go to and say, look, I'm struggling. Like, guys have come to you this past couple of weeks. I'm struggling with this. What can I do? Help me. Or,
Yeah, pray with me.
pray with me.
Give me some verses.
I've gone to guys' houses that have been in the study and set up the routers for them so that the stuff was blocked. So I was getting into the router and they weren't seeing the password I was putting in or whatever. And maybe I give the password to the wife or something or whoever and say, okay, this is the password. He doesn't need it. And then I make my changes. And then again, if he's got a cell phone, he can get off the Wi-Fi and get it if he wants. But again, you can put the accountability software on there. You can put a blocker on your phone. Now, praise the Lord, I didn't need any of that. Once I was freed of it, I wasn't going to look at it again, and so I don't have a blocker on my phone right now. I have it on the Wi-Fi at the house, But I'm not tempted. If I was felt tempted again, I'd say, okay, let's do something. Maybe I don't want to go down that road again, so let's put in some steps or something. But
Yeah, no, yeah, and it's out there a lot. I mean, I hadn't really dealt much with pornography, and then before Elon Musk got Twitter, it seemed like my Twitter just got. I think somebody got my password and liked some sites or something like that. Because I only became part of Twitter at one point just to support my brother-in-law. He had a new book. He wasn't on Facebook. I went out there and liked a few things, and then I just didn't even use it for like 4 years, 5 years. So it's just out there. I had it on my phone, and then when some election stuff started happening and there was the country seemed to be doing the shift, I started going out there to get information. And at first it was okay, but then I noticed like I started getting all this porn. So then I went through and like disliked a bunch of stuff, but then I found it was still on there. And so I stopped going on there, quite honestly. I started trying to find, or what I would do is if there was something I really needed, I would go straight to the search thing and look for that person that I was looking for, Matt Walsh or whatever, and go straight to that person to avoid the feed. So I just wouldn't happen on it. But I found I was shocked at how easy. Up until that point, I didn't realize. I mean, I knew porn was there. I knew that if you went to certain sites, you had to go seek it. It seemed like to get to it. But all of a sudden, this is probably like about 6 years ago-ish. It was like all of a sudden, I'm like, it was very convenient. I mean, it was just right there. It kind of blew my mind away that it's being pushed to me. Like, I'd seen it on like, you can go click this and go there, but this was like, it just starts playing right in front of you. It's right on your feed. It just opens up. I mean, you're not clicking but it starts showing part of the scene as soon as you're on your feed. I was just shocked at how that happened on overnight. And I guess because I'd only been really on Facebook at that point, Facebook didn't have, that kind of stuff on it. They filtered that out. So I was more of a Facebook person than a Twitter at that time.
Well, it's all over culture. I mean, we brought sexual sin to the world. I mean, not obviously we didn't.
Well, we're trying to force it on the world right now.
We commercialized it.
Well, I had the same issues with Instagram. I was getting like friend requests, and the profile picture that was a woman with no top on.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, just looking to see who was friending
Right.
me, you just showed me porn. I had no clue that I was going to see that then.
Right.
So I'd never been huge into Instagram anyway, so I just kind of stopped using it. And
Yeah.
but I've got a friend who's a deacon that said he'll randomly get a text of porn.
I get that
From a
occasionally.
random number, it just comes to his phone, and you got to think, what about the kids with the phone?
I've gotten those.
I mean,
Yeah. I was gonna say I've gotten them. Amy's gotten them. My wife's gotten them.
I've never had one of those, thank God. But I mean,
I haven't had any pictures. Mine are
Again-
just a link like, "Hey, would you like to get together? Click here," or something like that.
you're gonna get stuff sent to you that you're not even asking for. So not only is it out there, they're soliciting you for it. They want you to.
No, you
Well, we just said it's
turn your head and they're like, no, look.
we just said that it's over a $12 billion industry. Silicon Valley was known for computers in the late '90s, and when you had the telecom bust, I guess you would say, in the early 2000s, that was bought up by mostly the porn industry. Most people don't know that. So the porn industry in Los Angeles, in that corner of Silicon Valley, is almost as big as Hollywood in the movie side. So.
Oh yeah, everything. I mean, gaming, virtual reality. Like if you think like porn is gonna continue to be shoved in everybody's
Well,
face.
I would say too, and like the decisions you make, what you consume, are huge. I remember shortly after getting saved, Carrie and I used to be big Survivor fans. We'd watch Survivor a lot, and there chicks, decent looking chicks, run around in bikinis most of the show. And at one point, I just said, I can't keep watching this. And she's like, seriously? And I'm like, I just can't. I mean, I can't help looking at this lady in her bikini. I don't want to look at her like that. So we stopped watching it.
Yeah.
It's those the kind of decisions you need to make. Like what content are you consuming? What are you bringing in? What are you feeding yourself with?
And what triggers things on you?
And
Because it's different for everybody. I found that to be true. I mean, I have I have friends at the gym who get triggered just by tight outfits and seeing the panty lines through it. To me, I've got 4 girls at home, and to me, none of that is attractive. In fact, I'm the guy who I've gone to several women and be like, "Hey, you need to be careful because guys are looking up or whatever." Because I just think, maybe it's because I'm old now. I just go, that's like that girl's like as old, this is the age of my daughter. Like I would not want some guy.
it's a bold move though to going up to him. You could be an Instagram star, a TikTok star, get you on video.
I don't know. I've done it a
This
few
guy's
times.
shaming me for what I'm wearing.
Yeah.
No, well, I didn't shame him.
I know what you're saying, but
there was literally like, for instance, I'll give you an instance. There was a gal at the gym stretching out last summer. I think it was last summer or summer before. It was in the last couple summers. Had, the short shorts on that pretty much it's hard for girls not to get, and I get that. And she was talking to a couple girlfriends, so no guys around, and they seemed like probably 16, 17, 18 years old if I had to guess age, right? And I'm over lifting in one section, and I look over and I see a bunch of these young guys all kind of grasped together, and they're looking at her. And I'm, it was hard not to notice them. Now she wasn't noticing because she was talking to her friends. They were all in this big discussion. She's like this, stretching out and doing her thing, talking to her friends. And they had moved themselves so they could see straight up, and her underwear were loose enough so they were seeing the whole thing. The whole picture was available in the right direction where these young men were, and it was easy for me to figure that out real quick. So I just stopped what I did. I went up to her and I just said, "Hey, I just want to let you know I don't know you and I don't mean to embarrass you, but those guys behind me are looking at you because you're stretching and they can see up your shorts." And I said, and she was like, "Oh, thank you." She wasn't. I wasn't trying to shame her. I just figured she didn't want a bunch of guys her age, maybe from her school, joking about her later on, saying how they saw her. I said, "Hey, I get it. I've got daughters your age, and I would not want them to be embarrassed like that too." So, and that was it. I didn't. After that, I said, "Hey, I'm gonna let you go. I'm gonna get back to working out." I put my headphones back on and did it. I try not to. I tried to be somewhat discreet. I'm sure the young guys probably noticed and thought I was a jerk, but it's okay. I got 4 daughters.
What?
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm a dad. I'll protect I'll protect people. So, I think that, but my point is there's guys who are triggered by certain things in society, and you need to know whether it's watching a Survivor movie, whether it's being at the gym. I've got friends at the gym who don't go to the gym; they work out at home because that
Yeah, I mean, and
gets
that's
them kind of going a little bit.
kill sin or sin will be killing you, right? So
Cut it off.
if you're at the gym and that gym is too much, you can't handle looking away.
Yeah, I got a
Then
cool.
don't go to the gym, right? We work out at home.
I almost wore a shirt today. I was trying to support my triple play wear, but I actually have this cool T-shirt that says "Kill Porn." Mm-hmm. There's a group out there who is into helping college kids because it's like one of the number one things right now for college age that is been promoting getting help and getting away from pornography, and they have a bunch of cool little slogans.
That's
one of
cool.
them was "Kill
I like
Porn."
that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's so. Well, hey, any departing wisdom from you before we kind of wrap this up? Any thoughts for our viewers? Of what I mean, you said obviously take captive the thoughts. I think that's great. But anything else? Any little departing wisdom you got for people as they listen to this and think about this subject?
Well, one just about culture and where we're going in it. Just when I started out looking at porn, just seeing a naked woman was enough. But 30 years, 40 years in, that wasn't enough anymore. And you'll go down a road that you don't expect that you would ever go down. You'll see things that you didn't even think you would find attractive or that you'd want to look at. It can get to very dangerous places. So I would say just you can't control. You can't open that door and expect to control it. Or I'm okay. I'll be okay if I just see this. Or I'm just gonna do it. You can't. Once sin gets a hold of you, a hook in you, it's insatiable as far as content and more and different things that this doesn't excite me anymore. I need something else that excites me, right? And that's what you talked about. Society's getting into that's an insane statistic that the porn that's going all incestual type stuff. But that's when you don't have a biblical worldview, where you're not founded on the Bible. What all the stuff we're seeing in society, went from LGBT stuff being introduced to now trans stuff being introduced to having it in our kids, churches inviting this stuff in and having it in your libraries and in your classrooms and teachers promoting it. We're in grooming. We're in full grooming mode right now. People want their lifestyle. They want it affirmed.
Well, and they don't want to be
any means
called.
necessary. And I was the same way. Like
Yeah.
when I was working, and one of my best buddies was working with me at the bank. I was into porn, and he wasn't. And I was like, "What are you doing, dude? Come on, you got to get into this. This is great stuff." And he's like, "Ah." He wasn't a believer.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to pull him in. Like trying to bring my wife into it. What is this? It's
Right.
like so. But again, at the end of the day, though, this is the hope in Jesus Christ.
Yeah, sin will take you further than you want to go, right?
He made me new, right? When I humbled myself before him, he drew me to himself. And when I heard his word, and he convicted me in my heart, and he gave me the gift of repentance and faith, and man, just the way my life was then and the way it is now is insane. Like you would never know. When they say a new creation, literally a new creation, right? I mean, you wouldn't know or recognize that old guy.
That's awesome.
And I'm glad of that. Hopefully I'm a better fit for this world.
I like this, Don. I didn't know the old one, but it's
Man.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for listening in on this episode. It's a heavier topic than some of that we've had, but it's one that definitely needs to be addressed. And my prayer is that the church will continue to press to help our young men and women understand its dangers, and hopefully, I think you said this well. The best answer we have is Jesus, and the best weapon we got is His Word, right? So, and we need to make sure that we're clinging to the cross and clinging to His Word, and that'll be the first steps in dealing with this battle that's going on.
And if you're watching this and need help, reach out to Josh, and he can get hold of me. And
Yeah.
I don't have a class going on right now. We haven't had one in a while because we haven't had any interest, and nobody's signing up for them. So
Is there an email you feel comfortable giving out right now, or just reach out to Josh?
you can have my email. I got a fun one. It's donfresh 1968@gmail.
All right.
Right, so it's pretty easy to remember, and you could shoot me an email or get a hold of Josh in case it goes to junk or something. And
Yeah.
and I'm available to help guys, one-on-one mentoring. I can start a class again, and again, if we get interest and someone wants to show up, then we'll do it. And we're at Fellowship of Wildwood Church in Wildwood. So
Awesome.
I think what we can get out of this is some information, getting to know you, Don. But I also, for me personally, I think if this podcast, if this show does its job, I think it should not normalize porn, not normalize addiction to it, not normalize anything, but at least if somebody's genuinely in agreement that what they're doing is not in alignment with God, and they if there's something holding back, whether it's shame or discomfort or awkwardness, I think I would want this podcast talking about it to at least take away some of that stress of bringing it up, and like you had mentioned, you brought it up to your wife and kind of got shut down a little bit, like I don't, so I think not normalizing, I don't want to normalize, but just giving people confidence to
to reach out.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And not to be, I think the guys are so shamed about it, particularly if you're in church. If you're a church member and in good standing at a church and you've got this problem, I mean, that's embarrassing. I mean, it is.
Yeah.
But
Well, and on top of that, if you're on staff, I've had other pastors over the years who didn't have really an addiction to porn, but they started getting those emails that would come through and it would trigger something, and they didn't know who to talk to. Like if you go to your church and go, hey, I'm getting these emails and they're starting to trigger something in me. Oh, well, you got to sin. You're the pastor. There's these expectations and thoughts that somehow they're not human. And so, he'd be like, hey, can you just, can you check my browser? Can you, kind of hold me accountable? I haven't gone there, but I want to make sure I don't go there. I know the dangers, and I need somebody outside the church to kind of walk with me for a while. And do you have any tips of how to fix a router, how to address this? Is there some practical ways where I can make sure this doesn't trigger not just me but other members in our church, and so staff members at the church? So again, it's hard. It's a hard subject because also I think there's a lot of judgment that kind of comes behind it a little bit too.
Well, I think Don, you've lived this, you experienced this, you have a passion for it. I think if I ever had a problem with this or anything, if I knew the reaction, if the reaction I was going to get was with the reaction that people are listening to and hearing from today, I would 100% come to you. So I want people listening that I'm sitting next to this guy, Don. If you have a problem with porn, reach out to him. That email that he gave you, use it, because there's going to be no condemnation. You're not going to be shamed by Don. There's hope and there's light, and he'll walk you along that. So.
And I got two partners. One's another fellow deacon, Randy Carpenter, who helps me out in my class, and Luke Holstein. You know Luke.
Yeah, Luke's awesome. Great guy.
Luke's got a similar testimony. But yeah, we usually come together, and the three of us.
And sexual sin does not usually end in just sexual deviancy. It usually veers off into much dangerous and deadly paths. So.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it can. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, sin takes us further than we ever want to go, and deeper than we ever thought we'd go.
Absolutely. So, it does.
Well, hey, thank you so much for listening in on Triple Play. Thank you, Don, for being here for a couple episodes and chilling out with us, dreads and all.
It's been fun. It's been
I
fun.
love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Opening day, guys.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well,
I'm going.
All right. Awesome.
And that being said, don't forget to check out the website and our merch. We got merch going on, so we want you to do that. And
like and subscribe.
And with that, have a great rest of your week.
All right.
God bless.
I did your thing. I'm getting where my wife likes it so much. I've been starting to do it.
Is that fun?
You're
we're safe.